My name is Fleur Pierets, and I am an artist, a writer, but above all, I am an activist. I am here to talk about my work, but first I would like to tell you a story on how I came to the conclusion that being an advocate for LGBT rights is my purpose in life. I have been thinking a lot about the gay stuff, because that's how my wife used to call it. I had been married for 10 years to a wonderful man, but then I fell in love with a girl, and all of a sudden I was labeled a lesbian. So I can tell you that coming out of the closet at age 37 makes you question the whole concept of identity. So what is identity? For me, it's everything that comes after I am. What I know is that I am a privileged white woman. I grew up in a very unorthodox family, but had a very comfortable upbringing. My mother chose consciously to be a single parent and allowed me very much to do whatever I wanted to do as long as I was kind to people and had table manners. She was surrounded by a large group of friends, and if you weren't a writer, a painter, or a musician, you were a weirdo. So, needless to say, it didn't really raise a lot of eyebrows when I called home and said I was in love with a girl. In fact, my mother blamed herself for not seeing it earlier because my teenage room was plastered with pictures from Europe and Boy George, so that might have been a clue. Having a girlfriend, however, came with a manual. All of a sudden, I was part of a world where there was violence against gays, where children committed suicide because of their sexual orientation, and where people lost their jobs and their houses because they were gay. All of a sudden, the search for my passion in life became a no-brainer because I was lucky and I was happy and I wanted to give something back. Because let's admit it, I am lucky that I am here and not at this moment being a target to stones in Afghanistan, or being thrown off a tower in Iraq, or being on death row in Qatar just for being gay. No, I am here and I am lucky. So I was wondering how I could be part of anything that affected change. We are talking 8 years ago, and at that time I was writing articles about contemporary art for magazines and newspapers, and slowly I tried to include my new friends into the stories. I started to write an article about my wife, who was part of the Amsterdam drag troupe The House of Hopeless and performed as a drag king. Since my wife was a beautiful boy, the article was a big hit and magazines plastered her picture all over the place. Strengthened by this success, I kept on writing about drag versus activism and queer artists, but 99% of the time I got rejected and people were saying my articles were really too strange. Nowadays, some transgender people are used into high fashion, and there is some writing about queer artists into mainstream media. 8 years ago, that wasn't really the case. So since I got frustrated and my wife was an optimist, we decided to start our own magazine to open up the conversation. We had absolutely no idea how to make a magazine, but we did have the perfect name. We were going to call it Et alors, meaning so what in French. Inspired by French President Mitterrand, whom I found extremely cool when saying Et alors when a journalist asked him about his illegitimate child, we thought there was no better name for a magazine about queer, gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender artists. So we bought a book on how to make a magazine and we got started. One of the things we decided on from the beginning was that the magazine had to have a positive approach. So instead of talking about all the bad things that come with being gay and all the struggles that are involved with coming out of the closet, we wanted to focus on the uplifting things, on what was great about being gay, and on the path that people chose for themselves, and on the joy that comes with coming to terms with who you are. And we also decided that if we wanted people to open up to us, we had to go first. So we put ourselves on the first cover. Strangely enough, we received a lot of emails from people telling us we forgot to remove my 6th finger. And some said how natural Julian's breasts were photoshopped, which kind of gave us a unique sight at the human psyche, because nobody really thought that the beard might have been fake. So it reminded us of the circus and the woman with the beard, who was actually only a man in a dress. There is a lot of courage that comes from living outside the mainstream model. And that's what we wanted to show. Because we all have boundaries, but I think it's vital to recognize which boundaries are ours and which are a social construction. When you are born a heterosexual, your life comes with a blueprint, with a map. Your parents, school, people around you, they are expecting things. They are expecting you to have children, to buy a house, to have a job. I am definitely not saying that all straight people follow that paved road, but those expectations are there and they need to be addressed. Being gay pushes you out of certain traditions. You cannot just follow the person in front of you. No, you need to invent yourself by making your own choices. So what does it mean living by your own terms? And how can we create new ways of existing, and what are our options? One of our choices was taking a stance by making this magazine. For Julian, it was making something she wished existed when she was a little child. And I still remember her face when we got an email from a boy, 15-year-old boy from Texas, who loved to wear skirts, but which was a taboo in his community. When he searched the internet, he told us that the only people he could find were freaks, his words. But when he found our magazine online, he felt relieved. There were people like him. There were even people who were taking it into this creative plan and even making a job out of it. So he thanked us for letting him know, for giving him hope. And I remember Julian having tears in her eyes when she read that email, and she printed out the page and hung it on the wall of our office, because it was proof that we were doing something good. And apparently we were, because at some point the magazine reached 750,000 readers per magazine worldwide. Then we realized we had a voice, that we were capturing the zeitgeist of a world in the midst of its striving for change, and that we were working towards cultural awareness when it came to gender equality and gay imagery. We also realized that that voice came with responsibility. So we decided to do more. And we started to ask ourselves, what more is there to do? What more is there to inform, to talk about? And one day we were eating with friends, and the conversation came to same-sex marriage. At that moment, we found out that 4 of our very open-minded friends didn't know that we could only get married in 22 countries. We are talking 2017. So we started thinking, how can we get that number out there? Because everybody captures what's in their own comfort zone. And that's understandable. But like everything else, change starts with knowledge. And as you may or may not know, homosexuality is still illegal in 71 countries. And you can get sentenced to death in 12 of them. These are very normal things to think about in the life of an average gay person. But do people know that? Turns out they don't, because they're never exposed to it, thank God. So we wanted to make a project to let people know that in most countries around the world you cannot get married when you are gay. But just like our magazine, it had to be in style and in a positive way, because in our opinion, that was the first step towards lasting change and to building bridges. And we figured that marriage and love, something that everyone can relate to, was the perfect starting point to raise awareness. So Julian and I decided to get married in every country where same-sex marriage was legalized. We wanted to celebrate the countries that legalized it, but of course, meanwhile, pointing to the ones that didn't. Like I said, it was 2017, and we named the project 22. The name was a very conscious decision, and we hoped for an extra country to join the troops while we were on the road, because it would show that the world was in constant movement, and it would allow us to build a time capsule that instantly referred to the possibility of change. Meanwhile, the numbers have increased, and nowadays we can get married in 28 countries. However, at the current rate, we will reach global recognition in 2142. That's 123 years from now. So we wanted to see if we could get it to go a bit faster. Unfortunately, this time there was no book we could buy on how to get married in 22 countries. So we had to trust our gut and go with our intuition. Unfortunately, we didn't have the money to take this journey, but we figured that if we sold everything we had, if we sold our house, our belongings, we would make it to 5 weddings. After that, we hoped that there would be an airplane company or a bus company who would like to cover our travel expenses, and that people would let us sleep on their couches. So we took a leap of faith, we sold everything, and we ended up with each one suitcase, filled with the only belongings we had left in the entire world. But we also knew that if this project would fail, we would literally have nothing left. But we were brave and enthusiastic and very much in love, so nothing else really mattered. On Wednesday, September 20, we officially started our art project by getting married for the first time at the Marriage Bureau in New York. Our mailbox exploded, and every news and media outlet wanted to talk to us. We told a story of hope, a story of inclusion, and the press was labeling us role models. Julian and I got married in, like I said, New York, in Antwerp. No, this is Amsterdam, in Amsterdam, in Antwerp, and in Paris. After our wedding in Paris, my wife fell dizzy and was diagnosed with multiple brain tumors. She died 6 weeks later. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. When Julian died, I did not only lose the love of my life, but I also lost my job because we were working together. I had no home or belongings to go to because we sold everything. I had 2 suitcases. It's been 2 years now since that happened. And while I'm still missing her like crazy, the only thing that keeps me here, the only thing that keeps me in this life is my deep empathy and compassion for human suffering, and the idea that I can do something about that. Because as cheerful and pink cloudish our story may sound, we also received a lot of negativity. It started very small with Et Alors magazine, where people accused us of promoting the homosexual lifestyle, whatever that may mean. When we started the wedding project, things got nastier. We were receiving death threats, combined with lists of all kinds of torture practices that could be applied to us. Most of the time we were laughing them off, comforting each other that most mails came from an anonymous email address and was filled with typos, so how could we take that serious? The last weeks of Julian's life, the threats got heavier. Emails spoke of God's punishment because we were gay, and that we were getting what we deserved, and that they wished for my wife to die a slow and very painful death, which she did. So I can tell you it was very hard not to take it personal this time. But instead of feeling defeated, something happened for which I am still grateful. I got angry. And that anger made me even more fearless and more unapologetic than I already was. It gave me the feeling that my job isn't finished yet. So since Julian died, I haven't stopped working. I wrote a book called Julian. It's about our life together and the work we have done as an artist couple. And I recently met some amazing people with whom I'm turning this into a movie also. Last year I was in New York and I met a publisher who asked me if I wanted to write a children's book about two women, Fleur and Julian, who were getting married in all the countries that legalized same-sex marriage. In the book, Julian doesn't die, so it gave me the opportunity to finish the project, even if it's only on paper. So I hope this will help kids to develop critical thinking, to have an open mind, to see that difference isn't bad, that inclusion represents strength, and that love comes in many forms. For my next project, I'm going to live and work in an LGBTQ shelter in the US, because 55% of the homeless children got thrown out by their parents because they are gay, and they have no idea where to go to. More than 1.8 million LGBTQ young people of age 13 to 24 contemplates a suicide attempt each year in the United States. That's 1.8 million children per year. The suicide numbers for LGBTQ children are miles high, and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center speaks of 4 times more compared to heterosexual youth, and the numbers are only increasing. Minority stress, created by stigma, discrimination, bias, or bullying, is the main detractor to the mental health of LGBTQ children. But there's a little bit of good news. Everybody, gay, straight, bisexual, whatever, can make a difference. Because did you know that it only takes one adult, one accepting adult, and they can reduce the risk of a suicide attempt by 40%. Only one person has to tell them that they are okay, that they are seen. I want to be that person. Because imagine a future happy person. Imagine them telling their partner that their world changed because somebody told them that things will get better. Every one of us can be that messenger. Most people think all is well with human rights for gays. Why are we still complaining? You can get married, you can get children, you can have a job, you can even adopt. What more do you want? What more is on your list? But don't forget that only a few months ago there was a sultan in Brunei who wanted to pass a law that gays ought to be stoned. An LGBTQ activist was brutally murdered in St. Petersburg after her name appeared on a website encouraging people to hunt down LGBTQ activists. And not done yet, nearly 100 Polish municipals declared themselves LGBTQ free in the past month. That's 1/3 of Poland. And those are only 3 examples. In my opinion, everybody needs to know this. The road to equality is a bumpy one, and we are always on the verge of losing something on the whim of somebody else. I don't expect you to be like me. I became someone who is bouncing from one barricade to another, always on the verge of burning her bra. But I'm not underestimating my own ability to make a change, to keep on talking. I love the quote by Isaac Newton, who said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." A lot of us are here because someone made an effort. People of color, women, LGBTQ people. Someone made an effort for us to be here. Now we can be there for the ones that come behind us. So let's tell the stories from our ancestors, because they matter. Let's tell people about our history. Tell them where you stand when it comes to human rights. Tell them what comes after I am. Because what I learned from my wife is that love is the most important thing, and that we have to keep communicating love instead of fear, and that we can all be that giant, because we are the future, and it's up to us how we will be remembered.